What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA Mondays. It is your boy Scotty here. As you know, you can find me on Twitter at Scotty Drowned. I am welcomed today by a very special guest. You guys may have seen me on his show, The Daily Dose, on the Painted Lines Network. It is my man, Dylan Davis. Thanks for coming on the show, Dylan. I wanted to start out by saying that everybody that gets to view this, gets to listen to this podcast, be sure to go give Dylan a follow on Twitter at DylanJD98. You're going to find all his hot takes, find all his content on the Painted Lines. Great network, as you guys, I'm sure you guys already know. But Dylan, welcome to the show, man. What's up?
No, man. Thanks for having me. Just chopped it up on the Daily Dose for about an hour and excited to do it again. We were a lot of Sixers talk there. I'm sure we will be now, but a lot more NBA focus. So just thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, of course, man. You got a plethora of knowledge, when it comes to sports, especially Philly sports. But we're going to dig into the entire NBA today. So we'll go ahead. Before we get started, I do just want to plug in, of course, Heat Ratio Sports. You guys need to go ahead and give them a follow on Twitter if you haven't already, at Heat Ratio Sports. And, of course, be sure to go and subscribe on YouTube. That's where you're going to find all of our shows on the network, including Scotty Talks NBA Mondays. So here we are. So the first thing we're going to dive into, man, the state of the Eastern Conference, right? Obviously, we're going to get into the Sixers with this, but we're going to talk about a few other teams. The Bucks are surging lately. Hawks actually are surging lately as well. They've moved all the way up to the 5th seed. So we're going to talk about those things, talk a little bit of Nets with the Sixers. And then we'll get into Western Conference, the state of the Western Conference. The big news there, obviously, is the LeBron injury, how that changes the landscape of the entire league, as well as the Western Conference. And then we'll get into a little bit of trade deadline stuff, of course. Touch that Lowry piece. Let's start with the Sixers, man. We can start by recapping. I know we already recapped the Knicks and Kings game on your show, but for my listeners, my viewers, we can go ahead and recap it again. And even the Bucks game, I kind of wanted to touch on that as well, and kind of feed into the Bucks talk as well.
Sure.
Start with the Kings game. So, just a few takeaways you had from that game. How did you feel? Was that a very impressive win to you, or was that just another game in the middle of the road?
No, it's not just another game in the middle of the road. And I said this to you, not too long ago. I know we've talked about it. A lot of people have said these words. I've said these words a lot on my shows where, we get a Sixers W and the next day or even that night after the game, we're like, wow, that might have been the most impressive win of the season for this squad. And I came away from that Sacramento game saying the same thing, but I think the Sacramento game is actually the most impressive win of this season, simply for the fact that, look, we know Sacramento's not a good team, right? They gave us some issues in Sacramento earlier in the season. We know that De'Aaron Fox can give us some issues. Buddy Hield was on fire, like you said earlier. I think he had 25 points. He was stroking it a little bit, but no Joel, no Ben Simmons, no Seth Curry. No problem. And it wasn't just the fact that they won without the three of those guys. It wasn't the fact that they dropped 129 points offensively without the three of those guys. It was for the fact that this may have been one of the few 48-minute performances from tip to the final buzzer for the Sixers team this season. And it was without those guys, man. Their 24-point win. This team is clicking on another level right now. So my takeaways from that Kings game is just that 48-minute performance without three of your probably top 4, top 5 scorers, and your 2 cornerstone pieces in Ben and Joel, and also the Tobias Harris revenge tour of not being an all-star continues. I know it's lesser competition. It's the Kings. I get it. 29 points, 11 rebounds, 8 assists in 30 minutes for Tobias Harris against the Sacramento Kings. He's a grown man bucket, and it's almost automatic now. I know he struggled against the Knicks, and we'll get to that game in a little bit, but when he's on a night's rest, not having to play crazy minutes and back-to-backs, the dude is definitely an all-star, and that just continues to be my takeaway for the Sixers team, where he's kind of the guy right now without Joel.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you hit, you know, kind of my point with Tobias as well. There is that, you know, what else is Tobias supposed to do but play well against that? You know, if that's if those are the only teams on the schedule, he's just doing what he's supposed to do. And I think you're spot on, man. He's on a revenge tour, what you called it, and I actually like that because he's been on fire, you know, since the All-Star break. And think about it this way. So it's funny because I actually put a tweet out after that Kings game, you know, basically saying how quick Tobias went from overpaid or, you know, not worth that max contract to where now he is basically underrated as a player. And, you know, got, you know, snubbed on the all-star voting. So it's crazy how he went from overpaid to underrated within less than a season. And I think it's just funny in the way you worded, you know, his game against the Knicks. And he did struggle, you know.
Yeah.
You know, visually, he struggled on the court. He did close out the game well, but, you know, when a struggling night for Tobias is 20 points, that's great for the Sixers, right? You know, that a struggling night for Tobias last season was like an 8-point night, you know, with the same numbers. So, in that sense, I think that's a very high note for the Sixers.
You know, to your point there, and I was saying this earlier in the year, and it wasn't a struggling night for Tobias, but when Joel, you know, was eating and taking in the mid-20 shots and stuff like that, and Tobias wasn't getting as many looks, and he would have 17, 18 points around that area, and I would come on my show the next day and be like, look, a quiet 17 to 18-point night for Tobias Harris is gigantic for the Sixers team. Now it's a struggling 20, struggling 22 for Tobias Harris. That is crazy to me. And it's not Tobias Harris struggling from the floor to get to 22 and he's taking too many shots, resulting in losses. They're resulting in W's. And I'm sure we're about to get to that next game, but you just touched on it, so I'll say this. I just told you how impressive the Kings game was. In my mind, it might have been the most impressive win of the season. That Knicks game is damn close to just as impressive for this reason. You're still missing Joel. You're on the second half of a back-to-back traveling from home to New York. It's not a long trip, but you're still going on the road, right? He struggles. Ben struggles. You don't have Seth. You don't have Joel. And you still win the game.
Yeah.
So it's not I guess my point, Scott, is the fact that they're down Joel, the MVP of the league, in my opinion. They're down Seth Curry. And it's not taking 30 points from Tobias, 25-point triple-double from Ben to get wins. Yeah. Those guys are struggling, and they're still winning. Why? Because everyone's contributing. And it might not jump off the paper at you. Furkan Korkmaz, who you know from being on my shows, I'm not his biggest fan. He only had 12 points, but it contributed. Shake Milton scored over 28, I believe, against the Knicks. Guys are stepping up in place of Joel and you know, Seth, and I can't say enough positive things about this Philly team right now.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. You mentioned it. You know, the odds were against the Sixers to start this, you know, this game against the Knicks. And I do just want to give you credit for that Kings game. You know, they led that game wire to wire. That was, to your point, a very great, you know, win. It was Shake. Shake had 28 in the Kings game, and then he had 22 last 22.
Night? Yeah, I think you're correct. Yes.
22 last night. So Shake, you know, showing us some signs of the Shake that we used to know. So yeah, all great points. And that Knicks game is a game that we really had no business winning.
No, and also give Tobias Harris his credit last night, because people look, Tobias is the one guy in this city that, like you already mentioned it, people wanted him gone, right? Yeah. Worst contract, right up there with Al Horford's contract that this team has ever given out, blah, blah, blah. And even though he's playing so well for so long this season, I still feel like the second he has a bad game, there's going to be a select few that are going to come back out of their holes and start, you know, get at him. And you were seeing it for a slight second last night when he missed those 2 free throws at the end of regulation. But what's he do? Comes back in overtime, drills a corner 3, hits nothing but nylon, and then hits 2 free throws at the end of overtime. So even though he struggled, he came up when it mattered most. And it might not have been clutch in the sense of buzzer beater, last possession, last shot, but that 3-pointer and those 2 free throws at the end of overtime were as clutch as it can get right now.
Yeah, and it's crazy, man. You pointed it earlier, the Tobias Revenge Tour, and we're seeing a type of energy from this guy that we have not seen since he came to Philly. I don't know if that's Doc that brings that out of him, just that grittiness that, at the end of that Knicks game, the previous week where he's talking about I'm a mother effing all-star. That type of attitude is exactly what we love in Philadelphia. It's what we need. It brings a toughness. It brings a cockiness that this team needs. Obviously Embiid administers that aura,
right,
whenever he's on the court, but you need it from your other players as well. Ben Simmons is a quiet, reserved guy. Yeah, he'll give you a flex every once in a while, but we need another vocal guy like Tobias to come out and I even saw something very low key last night between Tobias and Ben Simmons. And Tobias actually, I think Ben turned the ball over trying to pass it to Tobias. And Tobias just said, just shoot the ball. He looked at him with this dumbfounded look and said, shoot the ball. And that's, that is what this team needs. I mean, that's the type of leadership that Tobias needs to bring. And this is another point, and this may be totally off topic, but did you see that 3-point shot that Ben Simmons hit against the Milwaukee Bucks at the end of that game?
Yes.
I'm sure you talked about that on your show last week. I was on vacation and stuff, but it once again, like the Cavs game at the end of the game, looks so nonchalant, so effortless, and so smooth. I'm looking at Ben Simmons last night towards the end of the game. I'm just looking at him. He's being left completely unguarded at the 3-point line. Just throw it up, man. I promise you, we will not kill you for it. Just shoot it, dude. I just think the more he does it, the more comfortable it's going to feel. The more it won't have to be at the end of the game when the clock's running out. But how did you feel once again? Because you mentioned that to me the first time after the Cavs game when he hit that 3. Didn't it just look so effortless? It's the pressure's off because he can't win at that point.
So let me sip my drink before this conversation. Okay. For your audience, I need everyone to know I'm not this guy. I love Ben. Okay. I don't need Ben to chuck up 3s. But I've said that to you after the Cavs game, man. I think you came on my show that next Monday and we discussed it. It's all up here. And it's why won't – so I was at the Knicks game, the Tuesday night game. So when you were talking about Tobias, talking to the crowd, I'm a mother effing all-star. I could see him talking to the crowd after he hit the shot in front of me, but I didn't know what he was saying until I got home and everyone, you saw the videos on Twitter and all that. So I'm watching Ben in warm-ups. And Scott, when I tell you he hit 8 of 9 from the corner in 3 in a row. He was the only player out there, probably 40 minutes before the game, 45 minutes before the game. And he hit 8 of 9 in a row. And it's 7 in a row at one point from 3. And it's fluid. And it's kind of pretty. His form is beautiful.
It's kind of pretty, man.
And it's just, dude. So you watch the Bucks one. It was fluid, like you said. The Cavs one was pulling up off the dribble 5 feet behind the line. And he cashed it, right? So it bothers me a tiny bit. Because it's why? Why won't you do it? Is Ben Simmons, Gint makes this point a lot on our show when you're on with us. Is Ben Simmons taking a 3 the best shot for your offense? No, it's not. But at once, twice a game, when you're wide open at the top of the key, so they have to respect it, or in the corner, when you get a pass, put it up. Even if it doesn't always go in, Ben, put it up because it's going to make life easier for you, Joel, everyone else on offense. And my last point is for the guy that we're going to get into a little bit in that Bucks uniform. Have you seen Giannis chalk up a 3? It is as ugly as it gets, dude. And he puts them up. So I'm sitting here like, okay, Giannis has no form. He shot like 0 of 5 from 3 before hitting the 3 against Philly in overtime. He finally made his first one in overtime, and he continues to shoot them when he's open.
Yeah.
If I'm Ben Simmons, I'm saying, wait, I look a lot better doing that. Why won't I do it? It doesn't make sense. It's not the best shot for your offense. I don't want him chucking up threes, but here and there, when you're wide open, dude, especially come playoff time, why? Why won't he do it?
Yeah. There's a lot to unwrap with what you said there. You pointed out a lot of key points, specifically that Giannis point, your point about, maybe it's not the best or the most high percentage shot that you can take. My counter to that, and it's really just devil's advocate. It's not like I disagree or anything. Whenever Ben goes into the lane, or if he's standing out at the 3-point line, wide open, that shot is better than passing it to like Dwight Howard. Like when he drives out. I think he did it last night.
You mean the first possession of overtime last night?
Yes, drove into the lane and dishes it out to Dwight Howard for like not even a 3-pointer.
Okay, that's another point, Scott. So you're on the floor with a dude that can't even shoot a free throw, and he's not hesitating to pull up jumpers in overtime. Why won't you do it? And this isn't me, dude. I love Ben. I love everything that he does. I don't focus on the one thing that he can't do. Exactly. I think Ben can help this team win a chip. But that element to his game would increase the percentage of this team winning a championship.
It's confidence, man. It's all mental, like you said. And it's so weird to me because, there's times where Ben looks so cocky and so confident where he's driving the lane, dunking, viciously and flexing and yelling and making faces at the crowd. But then there's other times where he's so bullish and timid and like kind of disappears in the flow of the game. Specifically in that game against the Bucks, I know, and no, I'm not blaming that game on Ben Simmons necessarily, but what I'm saying is when you see Giannis, he's starting to pick up speed in the second half. He's getting going, right? And he's starting to go walk around the court. He's starting to say whatever he wants. He's starting to throw his body everywhere. He's starting to get calls. He's starting to showboat to, in our house. So all these things are happening, and it's kind of like Ben Simmons is just like taking the back seat there. You know what I mean? Like,
and I know he was tired as hell, and he picked up a 5th foul, and he frustrated the hell out of Giannis in that first half.
Yes, in the first half, and that's what I was getting at with your point about Giannis is that he had a terrible first half.
Yeah,
and what did he do in the second half? He came out and shot it even more. And what that did, he got up to what, 30+ points,
32.
He was not scared to take those shots, and that's when you're evaluating those two players, right? And you look at everything that Giannis does and that Ben does. Yeah, Giannis is probably a little bit better of a shot blocker and a rebounder, but Ben is a better on-ball defender. They're both Defensive Player of the Year candidates. They're both top 5 defenders in the league. Both great, passers. I would give the nod to Ben on facilitating. He's a better facilitator. He's a point guard, for God's sake. Shooting is both of their weakness, right? So then where does the difference to where Giannis is an MVP candidate annually and Ben Simmons is, he's still a good player. He's just an all-star, though. Maybe he'll be Player of the Year.
So play devil's advocate there. Yeah, so to play devil's advocate there, agree with you 100%. And my brain was leaning, confidence, shot selection, who shoots the ball more. But so while we're both right and Ben should shoot it more, especially watching Giannis continue to chuck it with his ugly ass form.
Yeah.
Ben's not the number 1 on his team. Giannis is. Giannis gets 30+ shots a game. Joel Embiid gets those shots per game. So I think that plays into it as well. But Ben also, plays his hand of not shooting, he could shoot more. Even though he has Joel Embiid, he could shoot a few more shots per game. The question is, I watched Ben pass up an open three or to drive and kick to Danny Green, and Danny Green had a wide open three. That's the better look. That's where I come in and say, okay. However, it's all about expanding his game and making it easier in a half-court set for his teammate. If Ben Simmons would shoot a three or shoot threes, right? Not a lot here and there, and his defender can't sag off of him in the playoffs, you know what that does for Joel Embiid? And no, I'm not saying that Ben and Joel can't play together, because that is just 100% the wrong opinion. But he could make life for him and his teammates a lot easier if he just shot an occasional jump shot when he was wide open. Not asking you to pull up over someone, not asking you to pull up off the dribble. When you're wide open, dude, shoot the ball. Isn't that what you're taught from the time you're a little kid, Scott, playing basketball? What's the one thing coaches used to say? They used to say to me, you're open, shoot it.
Yeah, straight up. You have, and it's simple basketball knowledge. If you are on the court and you are not shooting the basketball, you're not presenting any threat on offense, then you're a liability on offense at that point. But yeah, to your point, there's times where it is okay to kick it out to the open man for the three, But like in that situation last night with Dwight Howard, just even if you're pulling up with a floater, one of those hook shots, we even see Maxey do that. He'll stop, pop a little floater in the lane when he's off balance. Just little things like that. It's because his floor perception is so great. His passing is so great. There's no reason he can't just dial it in a little bit.
His IQ is so high.
Right? His IQ is so high.
He's got that IQ has to translate a little bit further. Yeah. That high basketball IQ should translate to I'm wide open, shoot it. Not every time. Not every time. Exactly. Sometimes.
Exactly.
Sometimes. It can be really frustrating, especially, at times I feel like it's the worst thing for him to do is shoot a three late in the game and hit it like he did. Because now it's like, why won't you do it? All I'm going to say is this. I don't want to see any more offseason videos from him. I don't want to see it anymore. And, this isn't the tone I normally use, but we're in the middle of this conversation. I'm getting a little fired up, Scott. I don't want to see the videos anymore. Yeah. I'm tired of seeing you in an open gym versus other NBA players pulling up, knocking down threes, pulling up in the mid-range, fade away off of one leg over dudes' cashing them, and you don't do it in the game. Again, I'm not asking. Aggressive Ben is the only Ben I need. But I'm not going to sit here and be blind to myself and lie to myself and say that his game couldn't get to another level if he shot when he's open sometimes. That's foolish.
Yeah, and it's just situations, against the Knicks last night, you're in the second half of the game and Tobias is obviously struggling. There was a point in that Knicks game where they were bringing like a double and triple team on Tobias. Like it was getting crazy. And that was one thing I wanted to point out. The fact that Tobias is garnering double and triple teams while Joel Embiid is out. What are you going to do whenever we get Joel Embiid back? So that's a whole other combo. But, just like last night when Tobias is obviously struggling offensively, he got his share of buckets, but he wasn't himself last night. Ben Simmons, why is he not the guy that thinks, you see your other star, struggling? Why doesn't it click in his head that I got to be aggressive? I need to get to the rack. I need to get to the free throw line, which he got to the free throw line. I think it was in either overtime or towards the end of the fourth. First time getting to the free throw line in the game. Of course, you missed both of them because you haven't shot free throws the whole game. And now you're shooting in a clutch moment and you don't know what it feels like. So it's one of those things like, he got to the line, but he missed. It's not about that. You need to get to the line the entire game to get comfortable.
Yeah, so let me wrap this up right here with my point on Ben shooting. What I mean by if aggressive Ben, when he's getting to the rack and finishing, You know, when he slows down, takes that extra step, can finish. When he's got the jump hook, the you know, going in the lane and all that stuff.
Yeah.
When he's getting to the line and knocking down, you know, 70+% of his free throws, that's fine because Ben can get 20+ points just being aggressive and getting in the lane. What I mean by when I think Ben needs to start shooting from the outside is when you play Toronto, when you play Milwaukee, like he couldn't get in the lane and be efficient against Milwaukee. So what opens up the lane for him, Scott? When he starts stepping out and taking shots when he's open, because then they have to come out and respect it. Then you can get in, penetrate the lane a little more easily and facilitate to your teammates that way.
Yeah.
We watched, and again, I know that was the second half of a back-to-back. Maybe that's why he wasn't being as aggressive. I know he's got big-ass Giannis on him. I get all that. But they make like those teams, those defenses, they do the same thing. The lane is hard to penetrate against them, especially in a 7-game series. That's the circumstances I'm talking about when he needs to shoot. Ben can get to the rack all night. I don't need Ben to take a jumper. It's not needed that night. Nights where he can't get to the rack, can't get to the free throw line, yeah, I'm going to need you to extend your game a little bit more. Unless Joel Embiid's dominating, Tobias is getting whatever he wants, and Ben's just out there locking up the other team's number one, facilitating, doing all that stuff. Those nights are fine too, okay? But without Joel, you just alluded to it, Toby was struggling last night. Ben didn't play the night before, and maybe that knee was bothering him last night. I don't know.
Yeah, that is something to talk about as well.
But, you know, it's just another added element to his game when nights that he can't get into the lane and get to the rim, a jumper is needed.
Yeah, it's simply put. I mean, it's just about expanding your game and fitting it into exactly. He does it so well with everything else, you know, giving the team what they need. Give us what we need, you know, when we're having an off night, you know. You're struggling in regular time in the 80s against the Knicks. We need some help here, Ben. Like, we need you to score a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's what, like 16 last night?
Yes, he got 16, which is not bad. It's not bad, but you would like to see him hit that 20-point mark when Joel Embiid's not there. You know, unless somebody else is on.
Now to counter to go back to my point earlier in the show, that's why this win was that much more impressive to me.
Correct.
He only had 16. Tobias struggled. No, Joe. They still pulled out a W.
Correct.
So,
and that's the thing against, you know, even the Bucks game last week. You mentioned it on the tail end of a back-to-back against the Bucks, fully healthy.
Yep.
You mentioned we went into overtime with the Bucks.
Yeah.
I mean, Ben Simmons had 13 points and Tobias Harris had 19 points. So those are good signs. It was a bad loss to let them come back, but those are good signs.
Right. Imagine if Tobias, if it's not a back-to-back, imagine if Tobias hits 2 more shots, whatever it is. So, like I said, I love the way we match up with the Bucks, especially no Joel Embiid, dude. Good luck. Now, here's the one thing that I talked about last week when you were on vacation, Scott. Since we're on the topic of Ben, one of the things that he does do at the highest level there is in the NBA is play great defense. Ask Damian Lillard, ask Luka Doncic about that. But the matchup with Giannis when Joel was out last Wednesday scared me because Ben is the best defender. I think he's defensive player of the year in my opinion. Not just being a homer. I think he's the best defender. But even though Ben's 6'10", athletic as hell, long as hell, I just thought, Giannis is too much. Giannis is too much athleticism, too much length, too much body for Ben to, hold off all game. I don't know if it's been the weight room, whatever it is, but one thing that I took away from that loss is that Ben can guard Giannis and not just guard him, frustrate him. And Joel does that as well. So now when you have Joel, guess what? He's not the only option you had to throw at Giannis. Yeah. You could throw the defensive player of the year on Giannis as well. So that's one major thing I took away from that Bucks loss last week was the fact that in a 7-game series or when we meet him again, when Joel's back, you got 2 options you could throw at Giannis, not just one.
Yeah, because the problem they were running into is whenever Ben couldn't guard Giannis, and then, they're throwing like Dwight Howard at him or Mike Scott.
And then Ben got into foul trouble, so he's guarding with his hands behind his back. He can't be as aggressive.
Right.
He's tired as shit because you're in overtime of a back-to-back, which the night before the Knicks took you to the wire.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
circumstances. Kind of messed that game up, that Knicks game the night before. But I think that's a great point you bring up there as well, especially with the matchup with the Bucks. Is that, while I do think Joel Embiid does guard Giannis great, I thought it's a perfect matchup for him because he's so big and he is quick. But, the fact that Ben Simmons can guard him, and we also saw Matisse Thybulle strap up Chris Middleton.
Yeah.
He had him on lockdown. Like that was so alarming to me. Just because Chris Middleton has a little bit in his bag, he's a shooter. Yeah. Like he can score. And Matisse Thybulle was frustrating him. Drew Holiday, he is who he is. He's a great defender. He'll get you a few buckets here and there. But what ended up killing us late in that game, and I think this will be the difference when we get Joel back, is Brook Lopez. Simply, no matter who you had out there, they just weren't really a matchup for Brook Lopez because you have your best defender on Giannis. So what Joel Embiid also brings you is the ability, you could even, if you need to, shift Ben out there to stick with, Brook Lopez, play help defense, and then Joel Embiid guards Giannis straight up. But either way, Ben's going to be able to get out on those threes, close in and contest those shots. So that's another point that kind of feeds into your point that you had there with Joel Embiid. The final thing, I guess we didn't touch on the West Coast trip. We talked about it on the earlier show, but I guess before we move on to the Bucks,
we can.
How are you feeling about this West Coast trip? You don't have to give me, your total record sense, but just with these next, it's the Clippers, Lakers, Warriors, Denver, and Cavs.
4 or 5. 4.
Yeah, so just give me, which teams do you think we lose to in that stretch, and which teams do you think we beat?
Or it's 5. Dude, I don't 5 yet. So, look, with Joel Embiid, and I know we're going to get to the Bron injury later. That has to be a win. We've seen the Lakers struggle without just Anthony Davis. Now you're without Bron. That has to be a win on Thursday night. Even if Steph plays, the Warriors should be a win as well. But if he doesn't play, I know he's got a bruised tailbone or whatever, that has to be a win. And I know this sounds crazy because it's like without Joel Embiid, you never know what Sixers team is going to show up. But this Warriors team isn't that great anyway. With Steph, he just makes it harder for you. If he's out, has to be a win. Lakers without Bron and AD have to be a win. So that's 2 more without Joel Embiid on the floor. I don't know when Seth Curry's going to be back. He should be getting reevaluated today, I believe, or tomorrow. The Clippers, in my opinion, is a loss because you'd be coming off 2 more wins. Unless Kawhi's like a late scratch or PG's a late, something like that. If they're healthy, that's a loss in my opinion. I think Denver's a loss. Dwight Howard is going to get into so much foul trouble against the Joker. It's going to be unbelievable. And then you come home on and then that's a back-to-back with Cleveland. It wouldn't surprise me, and I don't want to say we're going to get blown out by Denver because we've seen how this team's been competing without Joe, and if Seth's back, they're only missing Joe against Denver. But we've seen Doc, show that in this league, you got to know how to lose sometimes when you just don't have it a certain night. It wouldn't surprise me if they don't have it in Denver, pack it in early, come home, and go get a game and go get a win the next night against the Cavs before coming back home. And that's not to say they won't beat Denver. I don't know, but that would be my opinion is beat Golden State, beat the Lakers, drop 2 in a row. And then, we talked about it earlier. The Cavs have been a thorn in our side this year. And so without Joel, that's not going to become any easier, but it's more of a winnable game than the previous 2.
Yeah.
So if you can steal one of those last 3 after beating the Warriors and the Lakers, you're 6-3 in the last 9 without Embiid. It's pretty damn impressive.
Yeah. And, to your point, I guess I'll just go down the list as well. I agree with you totally. Lakers, Warriors, they got to be wins. You have to beat LA when they don't have LeBron and AD. It's just as simple as that. I don't care if we have Joel Embiid or not.
The funniest part is, remember what I said to you on the Daily Dose an hour ago? This team hasn't dropped games that they shouldn't drop.
Yeah, exactly.
Can that continue? Can that theme continue?
Exactly. And Warriors are the same boat. Somebody told us earlier, Draymond, Steph Curry. So beat up team, even with Steph Curry, we're a better team than those Warriors. Yeah. They're a young team. We shouldn't even let them compete with us. The Clippers, I mentioned it to you earlier. I do think that's a game where if I take that singular game, it's not a back-to-back or anything. If I take it out of the context of this stretch,
sure,
where we've, piled up wins and it almost seems like we are due for a couple losses, it is a game that I think we could win. I think that Ben Simmons matches up well with Kawhi Leonard. We'll have to, throw Danny Green and Matisse Thybulle at Paul George, of course. He may even see a little bit of Ben Simmons as well. But I think that, that's a team that Doc Rivers coached. He does know, a lot about them. So hopefully we would come with a, very tight game plan. And I do think that we kind of need to get that game if we're going to go and drop 2 against Denver and the Cavs, because I'm with you in Denver. I just think that whole scenario is kind of bad news for the Sixers. It just doesn't really play into their favor. You're not going to have Joel Embiid. Might not have, Seth. Who knows if Seth Curry's going to be back by then. High altitude. You're in Denver. You're already going to be gassed just because of the change of, the change of depth in the entire world. So it seems like it's all piled against them. What I will say is you brought a good point up, Dylan. Just the fact that Doc Rivers knows when to lose. And I do agree, while our fans might want us to beat Denver and want that, against Joe, we have like this weird thing with Jokic. I don't really mind Jokic myself. I think he's a great player. And we just happen to have another center that is even greater, in my opinion. So it's not really like this thing where I hate on Jokic. But I do think that that's a game you kind of just, if it gets out of, if it goes a little shaky at first or gets it a little out of hand, like a 10-point lead, just let it go and let the bench guys
Tyrese Maxey run, man.
Exactly. Let him score 37 last time. So
if he's still on the team at that point.
Very fair as well. We got the trade deadline coming up, so we'll definitely get into that. But yeah, I think that's a game you kind of willingly drop, or I guess a game that you would say if we can get the win.
You read it. Yeah, you read the first quarter, the first half. You know, if you're in the game, if you like the way the game's going, whatever it is, you go for it, and then maybe you drop the Cavs game. Or if it's not going, your way early,
vice versa.
Let's get a ride home, boys.
Yeah. You throw the towel in and you head to Cleveland,
which I know a lot of Sixers fans aren't going to like to hear. But
you can't win every game, though, man. We got to be realistic. At the end of the day, even to say that they're going to go and beat the Warriors, Lakers, and Clippers in a row, regardless of who's playing, is kind of fool's gold by me. Like in a sense, there's just part of me that feels like Doc is going to want that Clippers game. But yeah, I agree with you. You throw it in, head out of Denver early, and you get your guys rested. Try to get this W against Cleveland, get them out of the way for once, and keep it moving.
Cedi Osman's going to destroy us.
Of course, it's always got to be the off-brand guy.
Sexton will have 38.
So the next thing, as we mentioned, the Bucks. I kind of wanted to ask you this because we didn't get to talk about that game that much. Giannis was doing a lot of showboating towards the end there. He hit the 3, then he came back, hit the fadeaway jump shot in the paint. And then he comes and does like this little schoolboy thing and sits down on our side of the court. Do you think that is going to come back to bite him? Is there any gut feeling there that we're going to see the Bucks in the playoffs, we're going to have Joel Embiid, and he's going to regret doing that shit?
You mean Joel Troll Embiid? That Joel Embiid? Yeah. I thought it was really, really dumb for 2 reasons. A, look, Giannis is a great player. Like you said, he's in a back-to-back MVP. He's going to be in the MVP conversation every year. I said it to you earlier. A lot of people are down on the Bucks simply because they're so afraid of the Nets. The Bucks are a damn good team, man, and you don't forget about them. I really like the way the Sixers match up with them, but that's a different conversation. They're still relevant. They're still a really, really good contending team. But with that,
who would you be more scared of, the Nets or the Bucks? Who do you think we match up better against?
I guess if the Nets are fully healthy, I'm with everyone else that the Nets are a scarier team. Simply because of the offense. And like I said, with Ben and Joel matching up with Giannis and just that whole matchup, I like a little more better. Yeah. I'm not afraid of either one because we got one player no one else has, and that's Joel Embiid. Yeah. So, it'll be interesting to see who we get in the postseason and what seeds we end up with. But, right now we look really good. But to the Giannis sitting on the logo, I thought it was really dumb for two reasons. A, like I said, you're that good of a player. You should have a higher IQ and know the circumstances of the game. I think a lot, and I'm being dead serious with you. I think a lot of motive into doing that came with Ben Simmons irritating him so much in the first half and him being so frustrated early in the game and them getting beat up by a lesser Sixers team at the moment. Because you have to know, it's never an excuse. A lot of people say, I don't want to make the excuse that they're on a back-to-back. Let me do it then. I'll make the excuse for the Sixers. They were on a back-to-back, okay, after having a hard-fought game with the Knicks the night before. Secondly, the MVP of the league is out, okay? And even if Giannis thinks he's the MVP, like him himself's the MVP, you still know who Joel Embiid is. You know he's out. So the circumstances, you're going to sit on the court this game of all games where we took you to overtime, down to the wire, blah, blah. Like I said, I think his struggles early pissed him off, and once he got going, he decided to flex a little bit. B, it's really dumb and stupid because you have to know who's sitting on that bench watching.
Yeah.
And that is who like I said, Joel Troll Embiid. And I promise you, it might not be as, outgoing as sitting on the logo, but he's going to get him back.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, how confident I am in the Sixers over the Bucks. He'll get them back when it matters most, and the final nail is put in the Bucks' coffin in the postseason if they match up. That's what I'm going to go out and say.
Yep.
Because you just pissed off the MVP even more.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on there. I thought it was, dumb as hell. And then he went on his whole spiel after the game as well. And even ESPN, I don't know if you watched like the Philly coverage or the ESPN.
I watched ESPN coverage.
Yeah, I was watching ESPN as well. And I think it was Doris Burke that said that was like a signature win for the Bucks.
Oh, I was tweeting back, and I think without
Embiid, I don't understand.
I think one of your boys from Heat Ratio tweeted about it, and I quoted it, and I was like, yeah, the broadcast is talking about how impressive this win is for the Bucks in Philly over the 1 seed. I think it wasn't Doris. I think it was the guy. The guy.
Okay, it was the other guy
talking about how it's a signature win for this Bucks team, and I'm like, in live time, I'm like, are they serious? Are they? What are you talking? That would be like the Sixers going down to Milwaukee and beating Milwaukee in overtime without Giannis, and we're fully healthy. Exactly. Would we in Philly be like, damn, that's a good win? Like, that's a really good win. No. We'd be like, dude, they didn't have Giannis, and it took overtime for us to beat them. I wouldn't be enthused with that performance.
Yeah, it's crazy to me.
And then, you know what? And these other fan bases, dude, here's the thing. I can be biased. All fans are at times. I try to be a little more realistic and level-headed. And I guess that's because this is what I want to do, this right here. Analyzing sport, broadcast, all that sport, radio. I want to do all this. So I guess I try to have to look at it through through a different lens at times than other people. But other fan bases, especially on social media, are either just always trolling or are complete morons. Because Ben strapped up Giannis. And even when Giannis got it going late in overtime in the fourth quarter, Ben wasn't the one covered. I'm pretty sure Ben held Giannis to 2 of 8 shooting and like 4 turnovers or something like that. And they're tweeting, defensive player of the year, and they give Giannis 32, 15, and 5 or whatever. Did you watch the game? Did you? because you would know that Ben held him to 2 of 8 with a bunch of turnovers and 4 points. Like that's just really, really stupid.
It reminds me of like that Devin Booker nonsense when he hit like the 40-foot 3-point shot, and all of a sudden that makes Ben Simmons a bad. It's ridiculous. What it is, it's it's amateur hour when it comes to analyzing basketball. Anybody, like that commentator from the Wizards that called Ben like the most overrated player. Come on, man. When you say things like that, it really makes me wonder how guys like that got the job, got to where they're at. Because
that is a guy that watched
understand basketball. Like,
that is a guy that has watched the Sixers only the times they play Washington. That's a guy that's seen the 3 games the Sixers and Washington matched up and have not watched another Sixers thing. And I commented this. I did a Sunday show with Gint and Brock Landis on TPL. And we chopped it up for a while, and we're talking about Ben and the game and all. And that discussion came up, and I said, I don't know like who he listens to or what he reads on social media or wherever. In what world is Ben Simmons overrated? Because all I ever hear is like his name being thrown in the trash and thrown around because of what we talked about earlier. People take what we talked about earlier and blow it up into this big thing, and because he doesn't do it or can't do it, they trash him for it. I never hear Ben Simmons get overrated. I never hear someone talk about how great Ben Simmons is.
Everything's always, we have to always question everything about Ben Simmons. If he's not shooting, then he's not good at basketball. So I don't really know where that notion came from of overrated. I don't get it at all. We'll keep it moving here though. So kind of the sense of that Bucks conversation was, they are a contender. Yeah. They should be mentioned. I agree with you in that sense. I think they should be mentioned when you're talking about the top teams in the East. You're looking at the Sixers, the Nets, and I think the Bucks are in that combo right now. Whether another team can consistently get themselves up to that level, say like a Miami Heat team that you would expect to get up into like a top 5 seed, I would imagine. I think they're the 4 or 5 seed right now.
Miami's the 5 and Atlanta's the 4, I believe.
So the next team on the list that we were going to get into, and this doesn't have to be elongated. They're just surging right now. The Hawks, very young, talented team. They shoot the lights out. It seems like I was going through like their roster list, just looking at the 3-point percentages. It looks like everybody on the team is like above 35%, which is just wild to me. And this is a team where you got like guys like John Collins that is shooting threes. He's actually shooting like 37% from 3 this year. But looking at this team, they're 8-2 in their last 10. They're the 4th seed in the East right now. They were last time I looked at the standings. I swear to God, they were not in the top.
No,
it came out of nowhere. Trae Young, you look at him, he's averaging about 26 points per game, 9 assists. John Collins is one of the names that I did see mentioned on the trade block. They are trying to move him from what I've heard. But you look at their team, they got Clint Capella, DeAndre Hunter, Danilo Gallinari, Kevin Huerter, and then Bogdanovich. So, I mean, these guys have a plethora of shooters at their disposal. And then you look at guys like, Rajon Rondo brings leadership. Clint Capella brings the defense. DeAndre Hunter is a pretty good defender. How do you feel about the Hawks? I was actually kind of high on the Hawks coming into the season. They were kind of disappointing to start out. Yeah. How are you feeling about the Hawks right now? Do you think they're legit?
So I'm with you. On the beginning of the season, I thought, I didn't think this team was going to be able to play like a defense outside of Capella. But I thought their offense would win them more games than than they have to start this year. And I think, the thing that sticks out to me of why I think this team as a whole was underperformed. And I think you see that with the fact that Trae Young wasn't even an all-star this year. So I think that kind of wraps that whole up and set, all that up into one and say, yeah, they've underperformed. So where I stand with them now, if they're real or if this is just, we've seen it a lot. a firing, a coaching change, a team gets a pulse for a little bit of time, and they've won 8 of their last 10. Can they sustain it? I haven't looked, and I don't know if you have it in front of you of who they've beaten in those 8 games. Yeah, I don't know that answer. So I'm not buying into it of the fact that they're a force. I think the Hawks are a playoff team. I think they've desperately underperformed so far this year offensively, but I do think they don't stay at the 4. They finish behind the Heat. I think they finish behind Boston. I think they're more of like that 7 seed-ish area, or probably 6 seed because of who's the bottom of the East. That's where I feel like they'll finish.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. It kind of just really depends how Boston finishes out the season, as well as Miami. But yeah, those are 2 teams I think should finish over them. I'm actually trying to see, where have the Raptors gone in the conference?
They've fallen back. So the Raptors started awful.
17-25. Geez.
Yeah, so remember, they started really bad to start the season. Then them and the Heat were like surging up at the same time. The Heat kept going, and the Raptors have kind of come back down to where they were. Like you said, 17-25, dude. Like, they're 3.5 games behind the Hornets and Knicks.
Yeah, so they ought to be, selling the farm now, right?
Well, that's the funny part. Remember a couple weeks ago when I had you on my show, and we were like, why would Toronto, be parting ways with Lowry? Like, they never just throw in the towel. They're never going to tank. And if they part ways with Kyle Lowry, they're going to need players back that can help them win now. I think them losing like they are right now and in the position they are might speak volumes to Kyle Lowry getting moved by Thursday.
Yeah.
Because they're not at anywhere near contention right now. Van Vliet's going to take over that Lowry role now. Apparently Norman Powell's going to be opting out. So could be moved too. If they can get, so that's why I think like Tyrese Maxey, I know this isn't the topic we're on, but I think Tyrese Maxey would be a really attractive piece for them. Hicks would be really attractive. So we'll see what the Raptors have in store there. But yeah, for the Hawks, I think they're really hot. It confuses me because they got rid of Lloyd Pierce, right?
Yeah.
Lloyd Pierce is a good coach, dude.
Right.
So I'm really confused as to what the issue was in Atlanta. Like I said, maybe the issue's still there, and just that quick change gave them a quick pulse, and they're going to start, they'll come back down to earth a little bit again. But
yeah,
they are scary because if they're hot offensively, they're going to be tough to beat.
They blew us out earlier this year, and it was kind of when they were in the middle of a rut. So,
like, what's crazy to say? I don't know what they're averaging per game over this 8-2 in the last 10. But just like from an offensive standpoint, I feel like seeing them in Brooklyn would be really interesting in a playoff series.
Yeah.
Because neither team can play a lick of defense.
Right.
So if you got Bogdanovich and Gallinari and Trae Young, and I think they're going to move Collins, but who knows? And you got Capella protecting the rim, and then obviously we know what Brooklyn's bringing firepower wise. Yeah. Just that offense, you'd see a lot of offense in that series.
Yeah, that would actually be an interesting series. I'm looking down the list of teams that the Hawks have beaten. They did get a win over the Heat. So they beat them by 14. That's a pretty good win. And then they beat the Raptors. That was a decent win, I guess, at this point. And then the only other notable win was against the Lakers, which that was
that just happened.
That was probably the game where LeBron got injured.
Yeah.
So not really that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we'll shift gears. I'm with you. I think they're
weird to gauge right now.
The East will balance itself out. The Miami Heat will move up a little bit. The Celtics will move up a little bit, and the other teams will, kind of fill it out. One last thing before we move to the LeBron injury in the Western Conference. Just wanted to shout out LaMelo Ball, man. That I heard about the broken wrist. That's just terrible for NBA and for basketball. He's a fun player to watch, and it'll be interesting to see who kind of takes their spot down there in that 8 seed because I don't imagine they'll be able to stay afloat.
Yeah, neither. Indiana's underperformed this year.
Yeah.
I know they've battled. TJ Warren's been out for a long time. Hurt just came back and they traded all. So they got a lot of stuff to figure out. But Sabonis was an all-star. You hear a lot of Miles Turner is in Defensive Player of the Year talks. So I think at the end of the day, the Pacers get one of those bottom seeds in the East, and this is slightly a joke. If the Sixers ended up playing the Pacers, TJ Warren better not play.
Oh yeah, man. Oh my goodness, that would be our luck though. Is that he would be like coming back fresh for the Sixers? Like, oh my goodness. But yeah, I would prefer to play Charlotte or even Chicago. If that ever came to a substance. But we'll move to the state of the Western Conference. There isn't a lot to talk about, as far as what's going on out there. Really, it just seems like teams are starting to kind of slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
You've seen the Jazz, throw a couple games away. I think the Suns are still second right now. They're 2 games behind the Jazz. And then, of course, the Lakers, the LeBron James injury is definitely going to change the landscape in the season for them. So I guess this is a two-sided question. How far is this injury, depending how long he's going to be out, it seems like it's going to be one of those 2 to 4, or so type of situations, 2 to 4 weeks or so, as far as the high ankle sprain. How do you think this affects the Lakers in their Western Conference standing? And with that in mind, how do you think it changes the grand scheme of the NBA? I mentioned it on your show earlier. If you're a team like the Sixers right now, who was kind of seeing that window opening more and more, now Embiid go down, we're playing better without Embiid right now. We'll get Embiid back. That window's wide open right now with the way the Lakers are looking. That's the team that I would most, I don't want to say fear, but I think they would be the most challenging as far as coming out of the West.
Yeah.
So two-sided question. You can answer those in whatever order you want. Basically, what's going to happen with the Lakers, and how does this change the landscape of the NBA?
So the changing the NBA, I think it changes as a whole, not just the West Coast, the East Coast as well. Like you mentioned the Sixers, East Coast, sorry, Western Conference, Eastern Conference. It changes the landscape as a whole. So I think teams that were kind of fringe, like they could compete for a title now that window opened a little bit more for them. Right. So now at the deadline, they can be a little more aggressive and say, hey, now LeBron's going to be back. AD could be back by playoff time. Obviously, they're going to be. But still, you never know how that injury lingers. Yeah. Now you got time to pick up ground. But I look at it more from a Western Conference standpoint. And, the team that you're hearing in the Lonzo Ball talks with the Clippers, I think that's a team that I could see saying, hey, I think that LeBron injury makes the Clippers a lot more busy on the phones over the next 2.5, 3 days to make that push to get up the Eastern Conference. And it takes me into this point when you ask about the Lakers and changing the Western Conference. So I think the Lakers struggle big time, dude. Like big time. They were struggling just without Anthony Davis. LeBron was keeping that ship afloat. You lose him, dude. Who's going to carry? Who, like Dennis Schroeder, like Kuzma? Like, come on.
I don't see it, man.
Serious? I think that the Lakers will fall to the 6th seed by the time LeBron's back. I'm not saying they will finish the year at the 6th seed, but before LeBron and AD come back, they'll be in the 6th seed in the West, because I look here, they got a game in hand on the Clippers. That'll be gone. They got 2.5 games on the Nuggets. We talked about it earlier with Joker and the MVP conversation, the LeBron injury. I think the Nuggets get past the Lakers over the next couple weeks. You said around 2 to 3 weeks. I saw a report that they're fearing it could be around a month without LeBron James. That's a long ass time and a lot of games within that month.
It's one of those things where he could, if you bring him back in 2, he might tweak it again and be out the whole other. So it's one of those things you got to play it really safe.
They with LeBron James don't care about seeding. They just want to get getting to the playoffs, so they're not going to rush them back at all. And then you see Portland's in the same boat as Denver, 2.5 games behind the Lakers for that 3 seed. They just got healthier. McCollum's come back. Dame's playing at an MVP level. Now, there's a way that I could see Portland dropping games. They shouldn't. So the Lakers to me are that 5-6 seed, but I actually think that the Blazers pass them as well, and they sit back at that 6 seed. Dude, all right, hear me out for a second. I dropped him to the 6th seed. But if he actually misses a month, and I don't even think AD comes back by then, or AD comes back a little before then.
Yeah.
I'm even looking lower. And they only got 4 games on the Spurs, 8 games on the Mavs in the 8th seed.
Exactly.
Okay, now that sounds like 4 and 5 games sounds like a lot. LeBron might miss a month. And I think they're going to be dreadful without LeBron and Anthony Davis. And Dallas, if Luka, continues to play at a high level, the Spurs are a weird team to read, man. Like, I just watched a beat up Sixers team pound them by 35, but they're still 22-17 in the playoff picture. Could you imagine if the Lakers fall to the 8th seed or close to out of the playoff race? Because now you're talking about maybe having to rush LeBron back.
Yeah.
It's going to be very, very because I'm looking at it at an extreme level. Yeah. I think they are going to be really bad. I think that 5-game lead over the Mavs could disappear like that in 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks. That's all it'll take. The way you're pointing it out, the way it's spread out over those last couple seeds in the West, they could lose that positioning in no time. And I'm just, the Clippers and Nuggets, like, that's a given for me. Portland, I agree with you. I think they will definitely pass them in that time as well. As long as their guys can stay healthy, of course. But, those 3 teams alone are kind of givens to me that they're going to drop below them.
I think the Mavs have underperformed. We were talking about the Hawks underperforming. I think Luka and the Mavs have done the same thing.
Exactly.
And I'd have to go through their schedule and look and the Lakers schedule and see who the Lakers could possibly get a win out of and who the Mavs would have to beat. But look, 5 games sounds like a lot. If he misses 3 weeks to a month plus, they're in trouble.
And that's what I'm saying, man, because I'm looking at their schedule. So, a month, that would push us into like April 20th, the week of the April 20th. So just in the rest of March, 2 toughest teams, 76ers and Bucks. So they have those 2. Those are 2 losses before you even get out of March if everything goes as planned. April is brutal for the Lakers.
Really?
So there's a span here where they play the Clippers.
Read them off. I'll tell you what they are.
I got you. So first game of April, Kings. They should win that.
They should.
They should, right? So then let me just read these games in a row. They have the Clippers, Raptors, Heat, Nets, Knicks. Then they have the Hornets. Then the Celtics, Jazz, Mavericks, and then you finish out the month with Magic, Wizards, and Lakers, which maybe LeBron will be back by that time, which would be April 26th. So if he misses
if he misses all that time, they're losing double-digit games in that span that you just read off.
Yeah. Mavericks, Jazz. Those are 4 losses.
Sixers, Bucks. That's 6. Heat, Celtics. That's 8. Nets, 9. And then you throw in the Knicks, the Kings, the Hornets. They should beat.
But any one of those teams, they could.
Oh, you said Clippers too, right?
Yeah, the Clippers are there as well.
That's 10. 10 is given. I'm telling you right now, 10 is given.
Brutal, man. That is brutal. That's actually crazy now that I'm looking at it. They could very well fall out of the playoff hunt. It's crazy. It's crazy. And, I'm not saying that they won't make the playoffs because, AD and LeBron coming back, if they do come back at the same time, whatever happens, maybe enough of a push to get them in, with a lower seed.
Especially when you look at who's out of the race. Like Golden State's the next team. They're 9 games. They're a game out of a playoff spot, but Steph's out right now, so I think they're going to drop some games. Then you got Memphis. The Pelicans, are on. They're 18-24.
Right.
So I know this wasn't planned, but I see some people say Zion lives up to the hype. Yeah, I'm going to need you to win some more games, bud, before you up my hype. Because your supporting cast isn't that bad. And I had a lot of conversations with people before the season started, people telling me that they would make the playoffs over the Suns and Trailblazers and all. And I said, you're nuts. But I didn't expect the Pelicans to be 6 games under 500.
Yeah,
I know he's extremely young, and this is rough to say. You can't be 6 games under 500 when you're that guy. And then you have a guy that can score over 20 a game in Brandon Ingram. Lonzo Ball's shooting a 3 at a crazy clip. They should not be 6 games under 500.
To be fair, I will say the only team that are actually in the playoffs in the West right now that I would think that the Pelicans could take their spot is San Antonio. All those other teams I do think are better than the Pelicans, but I do agree with you. They're very underwhelming and very disappointing, similar to the Hawks, just disappointing young team. Maybe I'm just putting them a few years ahead of where they actually are. I don't know. But I agree that I think they got a great cast. I mean, Steven Adams, Eric Bledsoe, Brandon Ingram, Josh.
And I'm not to your point about
players.
To your point about the playoff picture, I agree with you. I didn't think they'd. I picked them. We did a show on the Faithful Fanatics a couple weeks before the season started, and we listed the Western Conference. And, there was, a couple teams that had to be out. And my two of my co-hosts were saying that the Pelicans would make it. And I picked the Pelicans to be out. So I didn't think they'd make the playoffs either. But I didn't expect them to be 4.5 games out of the 8 seed at this point of the season.
Exactly.
That's my issue with it.
The fact that they're not the guys that are just waiting there to grab
to get in. Yeah, like you got games to make up to even get an 8 seed, dude.
They're fighting. Yeah, they're fighting to get to the play-in tournament. It's wild.
I forgot about that, actually.
Yeah, right?
What is that again? Wild. That's if the 9 seed is 2 within 3 games or 2 games of the 8 seed or something like that, right?
Yeah, and then they have like a little play out to see who's going to make it. So God forbid,
I don't like that, by the way.
Into that either.
I hate that, by the way.
So who would you have? This is kind of where we'll end the Western Conference talk. We'll get to the trade deadline, and then I'll get you out of here. Who's your best team in the West right now with the injuries to the Lakers?
Okay. I'm going to go with the Clippers. I think Utah are frauds. I've been saying that for a while. You're kind of seeing them come back down to earth now. Now they could pick back up, but I think they're coming back down to earth a little bit. I love Phoenix. I've said it before the season started, but to say that they're the best team in the West, I know that, they're even ahead of the Lakers before LeBron's injury, but I can't say that they're better than the Clippers. I would take the Clippers over them in a series. The Nuggets are very intriguing, but if I'm going talent, who I would take in a series, I don't think Paul George and Kawhi are going to fold like they did in a second half of a game 7 again. So I like the Clippers with this Lakers injury, and I think the Clippers could finish top 1 or 2 by the time the season's over because, like I said, I love Phoenix. I don't expect that to keep up like them 2 games above the Clippers, and if the Jazz keep falling the way they are, I think the Clippers can surge. But, Kawhi misses some time, dude. Paul George has missed some time. Pat Bev's missed some time. So you never know with this Clippers team. But again, with this LeBron injury, especially that being the other LA team, they play in the same arena, they're fighting all the time. Expect them to be the team in the West to go, oh, our window just opened up.
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
Yeah. I totally agree with you there. And I thought that was a brilliant point that you brought up earlier in the show about the Clippers. I just wasn't, for some reason, and I've mentioned this on a couple different shows. I've really fallen off of like the Clippers as contenders wagon.
Sure.
You know, between last year's disappointing end and then this season, just kind of, you know, they're kind of just under the radar right now. Maybe that's a good thing for them. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think you're spot on in the fact that these injuries should open the Clippers' eyes wide open. That management needs to open up right now. This is your time to take control of the West, get your proper seeding, get where you need to be comfortable in the playoffs, and take your shot while LeBron is down, right? Like, this is your chance.
Like what did you bring Paul George and Kawhi here for?
Exactly. You brought them here to win a championship, right, and to get over that hump. So I'm with you on the Clippers. I didn't even think about them. I was actually going to point to the Denver Nuggets, that you actually mentioned as well. I'm with you on Phoenix. I think they're a great team. I think they'll give teams fits in the playoffs. I think the Jazz are similar in that sense. But I
just don't think they're overall better. Yeah.
Yeah, for the Phoenix Suns to go from not making the playoffs to like going to the Western Conference Finals just because of Chris Paul is just kind of ridiculous to me. If it happens, I'll eat my words for sure, but I just am not a believer just yet. I was looking at Denver in the same sense that you're kind of looking at the Clippers, and I think they both are in the same realm right there where they should be looking to make a move to swing the needle right now to take control of the Western Conference. Both of those teams are sitting right there in a prosperous position where they can take over the Lakers for sure, but they're only a couple games back from the Suns and the Jazz too. So you can get all the way up to the first place by the time LeBron is back, and you can hold that spot to the end there. So I'm actually right there with you. I think the Denver Nuggets and the LA Clippers are in very similar standpoints right now.
I'll tell you what would suck. You know, remember on the Daily Dose, me, you, and Gint were joking about like the Sixers getting the 1 seed, but Boston underperforming this year, and we got to play Boston in the first round. Like, I don't want that, right? Like, I'm not saying we won't win, but I don't want that. Right. Imagine being one of these teams in the West that gets like the 1 or the 2 seed, and Bron and AD come back, and you got to play them in the first round because they dropped that much. You know how mad I would be, dude? Like, imagine being a Clippers fan. They make the move, right, at the trade down, whatever it is, Lonzo, whoever it is. They get the 1 seed in the West. Lakers drop how we're talking they might drop. They finish as the 8 seed. Now your home playoff games aren't even really home playoff games. And that's your first round matchup is Bron and AD coming back off an injury. Right. Probably a wee bit pissed off.
Yeah.
They're the 8 seed right now.
Oh, that is actually a great point. And it's even funnier because you mentioned if they're playing the Lakers, it's no longer home court advantage. It's going to be full of Lakers fans. Like, it's going to suck. And I guess that's a good way to end that whole segment there is by saying that, you know, even if the Lakers do drop down to the 8th seed, while I say that should be kind of eye-opening for these other teams, if LeBron and AD are healthy in the playoffs, they are going to win the West. And I don't want that to get like forgotten in this conversation. I'm taking into account that those guys are out, they're unhealthy. If they're healthy, they're playing in the playoffs. I'm taking them over any team in the West in a 7-game series, period.
Now, I feel like you have to attribute where they're seated, so who they're playing in the first round, and how much time, how much before they've come back before that first round. Like, if they come back with, you know, just off of injury and they got to play the Clippers or Denver in the first round and they're not, you know, back into game shape or fully healthy like that, the chemistry is a little bit off. Now, that's worrisome. But I agree with you. If they got some time back under their belts and in their legs before the playoffs, the rest of the West is going to be a little bit in trouble.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. So we'll kind of finish up. I'll get to the trade deadline targets, and then we'll get your top 5 players. We'll get you out of here. I'm just going to give you kind of, you know, a list of players that are kind of available. They've been rumored around. Okay. We'll talk about them, maybe talk about, you know, I think I gave you like 3 teams to pick that you think need to make a move before the deadline. Yeah. We'll kind of just go at it about that, kind of like that. So Kyle Lowry, which we've already mentioned, he's been tagged to the Sixers and the Heat. We have Lonzo, who you mentioned. He's been tagged to the Clippers as well as the Denver Nuggets, who are in on him as well. And I've also even seen rumors about the Sixers. I don't know how much of that is true, actually. Some other names are Norman Powell of the Raptors that we mentioned earlier, John Collins of the Hawks, Harrison Barnes of the Kings, Aaron Gordon of the Magic. Magic are selling the farm apparently, but they're not going to sell anything because everything's way too high priced from what I saw earlier. We got Kelly Oubre Jr., who I think is actually pretty interesting from the Golden State Warriors. And then Evan Fournier, just a couple names that I saw in Zach Lowe's article today, just being shopped around. Do any of those guys intrigue you for the Sixers? I guess I would say, aside from like Lonzo and Kyle Lowry, which are the obvious ones.
Those two intrigue me, obviously. Evan Fournier intrigues me. Harrison Barnes intrigues me coming off the bench. Price, I think his contract's pretty high.
Yeah, his contract's ridiculous, I think.
So I guess my point is, for looking at it from a Sixers standpoint, the only player I'm willing that has a higher like salary contract where the Sixers have to match with Danny Green or whatever, that I'm willing to part ways with Danny Green for is Kyle Lowry. So I'm not, because my point is, I think you get better adding Kyle Lowry and subtracting Danny Green and whoever else.
Yeah.
I don't think you get better adding Harrison Barnes and losing Danny Green and whoever else to subtract. Like adding Harrison Barnes to Danny Green and everyone else, yeah, you get better. Yeah. Adding Harrison Barnes in place of them, you don't get better. Fournier, I think you could get for, not having to ship any Danny Green or anything like that. Barnes intrigues me because he can spread the floor a little bit and, and can come off the bench, but salary-wise, I don't think it works.
If you struck out on Kyle Lowry, how open would you be to like a guy like Norman Powell?
I'd be extremely open to Norman Powell. The issue is, I think what's his contract? Do you know that or no?
I think it's up after this season, but basically what I've read on it was that if the Sixers owners are okay with paying some extra taxes, if they're not stingy as hell, they would get his birds rights from his rookie contract, basically, and we would be able to send him back no matter what.
So Norman Powell really intrigues me because he can come off the bench because that's basically his role in Toronto. He can handle the ball. He's a secondary ball handler. He can shoot from three.
Yeah.
He can play off the ball. Like he doesn't need the ball to be effective. So yeah, and I've seen him hit clutch shots in the playoffs before, even coming off the bench for Toronto. So that name does intrigue me as well. I just don't, that hasn't been a name I've seen linked to the Sixers much at all. So that kind of has flown under the radar for me. So I don't know how he'll get here. Aaron Gordon doesn't intrigue me at all.
No, yeah, that doesn't.
Who else did you name?
The only other
Lonzo I would love. I just don't think he's coming here.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he's going to have too many suitors. I think that's what it's going to come down to. And we're not going to be willing to give up what they would get from another team.
Yeah.
How about, with Kyle Lowry, it says here that it said in Zach Lowe's article I read earlier today, basically it's between us and the Heat. If you see the Heat are on the other side there and they're trying to push the needle for themselves, how much more does that make Daryl Morey aggressively trying to get Kyle Lowry? Or do you kind of just take the back seat there and be like, man, I'm out of this contest? Because the Heat have a pretty good package they could offer for Lowry.
They could, but I don't think they'll offer that package. There's
offer a package that would get it done, right?
Yeah, they're not offering Tyler Hero. I'll tell you that right now.
Exactly.
He's not going away in that trade. They could throw Duncan Robinson in there, but then, Lowry to the Heat, like from a Philly standpoint, doesn't scare me.
Doesn't make sense, right?
I know he's boys with Jimmy, but like that duo, I want Lowry badly on the Sixers, so I know I'm kind of being a hypocrite. I run him so badly because it fits for us. And next to Joel and Ben and Toby, he would be awesome. In Miami with the way they've been playing, like I just don't see it, and it doesn't scare me to where he would move that needle too much where they could beat us in a series or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely agree with
another thing that I've had a couple people mention to me today is, you don't know that the Heat are actually in. The Heat or Toronto, could just be, leaking that stuff to drive up the cost for Daryl Morey and the Sixers. But to answer your question was, how much, more aggressive does Daryl Morey become to not let him go to the Heat and get him over the Heat? I don't think Daryl Morey, we've seen him make some big trades before. I don't think he's that guy that's going to force the trade and offer just to beat out the Miami Heat, who, in my opinion, they're not the runner-up Miami Heat from the bubble. They're like the Miami Heat don't scare me in a play. I know they gave us fits last year. Different Joe, different Ben, Kobe, different coach, different role player. Like the Heat don't scare me at all in a series. So I don't think he's looking at it like as to where if the Nets acquired another big-time player over us that we wanted, where it would put the Nets way over us. The Heat don't give me that vibe. So I don't think it would force Morey to be overly aggressive for Kyle Lowry like that. If the Heat want to offer a crazy, insane package for him, let them.
Yeah. I think ultimately it would hurt them, more than what they would, kind of imagine. I'm with you on the Heat there. As far as that fit, it just doesn't really make sense to me. I look at, a guy like Goran Dragic, like, is he part of the trade? If not, where does that fit with him and Kyle Lowry?
If I'm the Sixers, I'm pairing Lowry to this core. If you're the Heat, okay, yeah, you're pairing Lowry to Jimmy and Bam, but you're probably going to have to give up, like you said, a Dragic, that's a key piece to that team. A Tyler Hero, that's a key piece to that team. Something like that. And that much better.
Because if I'm the Raptors, I like with the Heat, like, I get it, because the Heat can offer, they have more to offer that they would be, you would think they would be comfortable with offering. But in reality, it's like they shouldn't offer that. You know what I mean? So while they have more, they shouldn't do that themselves, in my opinion. Because if I'm the Raptors, I'm going to the Heat and I'm saying, you either give me, you give me Tyler Hero, you give me Duncan Robinson, you give me Goran Dragic, or none. If you want to give us the younger player, that's fine. You can give us Kendrick Nunn. And then, maybe a throw in like Kelly Olynyk or something, something stupid like that. And then draft compensation. Like, that's going to be what I want from Miami. It's like, are you willing to give that up? Maybe with Tyler Hero, you don't have to throw Duncan Robinson in there. But if I'm Toronto, I'm not doing that deal without Tyler Hero. Just like I wouldn't do the deal with the Sixers without Tyrese Maxey. Not calling Maxey the same player as Hero. I don't want that to get misconstrued here. But I'm with you. I just don't see the fit there, and I would not get into a bidding war with the Heat. Like, I would let them have him if that's what they're going to go for, because I think it would help us more if we got Lowry than what it will help the Heat.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I want Lowry bad, and that speaks volumes.
Yeah, exactly. So the last thing there with the trade deadline. What are a couple teams that you think need to make a move now before the deadline? Regardless of the buyout market, need to make a move before the deadline to make their team better to contend this year.
All right. I'm going to start with the Sixers because, like I said, they can compete for a title now. If they make a move, not a huge spot, it doesn't have to be, I want Lowry. It doesn't have to be Lowry. A stretch big off the bench, a shooter or a backup point guard off the bench, whatever it is, to strengthen your bench, because your starting five is solid.
Right.
Especially healthy. To strengthen the bench, to bring more scoring off the bench, and when the spacing and all makes sense with Ben on the floor, you see it with the White and the spacing's just not there when they're together. So the Sixers, I think, are a team that, can they win a title as is? I think they can. Their odds go way up if they improve their bench, or add a Kyle Lowry type player and not have to give up a ton. I'll start with them. I know people are going to push back at me with this, or disagree with me and call me crazy. The Brooklyn Nets, and it's one area, and that is a rim protector. That's it. And I know it doesn't sound like a crazy ass name, but. And I'm not saying that they can compete with Joel Embiid like anything like that. but a JaVale McGee and Andre Drummond signing buyout and that might not I could be wrong there. That's not trade. That could be more so buyout market. But let's just combine them both for what they are. Buyout market or trade deadline. If they add a big rim protector that can just, be that body to throw at Joel, now you got my attention.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think, while I don't think that like Andre Drummond would push the needle to where I know everybody would lose their minds and they would say that the Nets are the foregone champions already. It doesn't push it that far for me, but it would push it further enough to where I can now see the Nets giving us a fit. If you have a guy like Drummond that can go hit the boards like Joel Embiid, he's not as talented or skilled.
He's a big body,
big guy. Yeah,
that's what they need desperately, man. And
I agree with that.
So I think they're up there, and I'll throw in a Western Conference team. I'll go Clippers. I think just because, the Suns, I'm not hearing anything from the Jazz or the Suns. So I don't think they're going to really make any moves. The Lakers, what are you going to do? Just find someone to come in time while LeBron and AD are out? Wait till they get healthy. The Nuggets are also a team because we've heard them be linked to Lonzo and all, and they're talking about trading Will Barton or whatever. They just don't play him a lot anymore. Yeah. But I think more so the Clippers because, like I said, when you have that core of PG and Kawhi, we know what you're about. You're trying to win a championship. Yeah. Now the injuries to the other team in LA, go do it. So I think the Sixers adding either Lowry or key pieces that can play in the playoffs off the bench, the Clippers to propel them to the top of the West, and the Nets adding a big rim protector, shot blocker, glass cleaner is key for them as well.
Yeah, no, and I thought those were some key points and some good teams there. As far as the West Coast, I'm the same with you. I had like 4 different teams listed here. My 2 on the West, I had the Denver and the Clippers. For the reasons that you pointed out earlier, LeBron's down and out right now. It's time to make a strong push. Denver and the Clippers, they could use a little bit of a spark right here. A move at the trade deadline right now for the Clippers might be enough to push them, to give them that surge to get to the number 1 seed while LeBron's out. So, just in that sense, going for it right now, I think the Clippers and the Nuggets, they need to go in and get some guys. You got to make some moves. You got to go for it. Because you look at these 2 teams, you look at the Clippers, Kawhi and Paul George, like what's their championship window? We're in it.
I was just going to say, they're not getting any younger either.
Exactly. And I know, Jokic and Murray, they're a little bit younger, but eventually with Jokic and Murray, it's going to get to the point where
out and they're going to get split up.
Yeah, like what are we doing here? We're not going to the finals anytime, but we're getting, to the second round of the playoffs every season. We got to make a big move and bring some talent in, whether we got to switch out Murray and somebody else.
Right.
So, how long do they have before their tandem is broken up, like you said? And the Jazz are probably they kind of gotten out of that talk by the way they started out the season, but they're starting to fall into that. They're slowing down a little bit. You talk about their core. It's Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. They've been there for years now. And it's the same thing that people say about the Sixers, right? The same reasons that they were saying the Sixers need to ship somebody out. At least we got a new coach and we get to see. But, it's similar in that sense where if you're getting to the same place every single season with that core, then you got to change the core. And so I think right now for those teams, it's time to make a move, see if you can add to the core. And if this doesn't work in the offseason, you got to make some moves and some big changes,
I agree.
We'll take it back to the East. I'm with you on the Sixers. I think, they're a team that when they're on, they could beat anybody. Too much inconsistency for my liking. I think when you add a guy like Kyle Lowry, he's going to give you 15 a night easy. It's not going to be a questionable 15. It's going to be 15 a night. And I think that's simply what they need. They just need one more guy that can do it every night.
And I'll answer this for everyone, that's going to question, well, you just talked about how the bench needs strengthening and Lowry would start. Yeah, you're right. Guess what I do if I'm Doc Rivers and I ship out Danny Green and Kyle Lowry's coming in his place? Matisse Thybulle starting and Seth Curry's going on the bench. So now the bench is getting a shooter and scoring in Seth Curry. Your starting five gets that defense. Dude, Ben Simmons, Kyle Lowry, Joel Embiid, Matisse Thybulle, and Tobias Harris. Are you kidding me? Defensively?
That's the best defensive lineup in the league.
And then Shake and Seth are your backcourt. Okay. And I know we don't second unit backcourt. Now you take that Matisse defensive bread, but then that's where Doc has to not use hockey shifts in the playoffs and kind of, utilize the minutes differently with Tease and the bench and the starters. So where it's not just Tease is playing with Ben and Joel and all, Tease is also playing with, and I get it. It would be really weird for a second because so much of what the starting five is and a lot of the success they have offensively is the spacing with Danny and Seth. Now you make that move, neither of them are in your starting lineup anymore. But guess what you have in your starting lineup? Kyle Lowry, who can get his own shot.
Exactly.
And can also space the floor. So Thybulle's the only one that doesn't, but even Thybulle spaces the floor technically.
He's up now, he's hitting.
He doesn't shoot it like Danny Green or Seth Curry do, but guess what? Now your bench unit has a guy that doesn't shoot it like they do now, and Seth Curry.
Exactly.
So, and that's what Seth really is a bench player. He's not normally a starter.
He's a six-man type of guy. That's right. Exactly what he is.
That is my 100%. And then I'd have a buyout move for a stretch big. Be Elite, someone like that. So now your bench unit is Shake, Seth, the stretch big. The White's going to get some run depending on the matchup in the postseason and how it looks. As of right now, Furkan would have to be in there. Paige would say it, but he has to be in there. Yeah. And then that's your bench. Do I hockey shift them 5 for 5? No. That's where Doc would have to adjust as well.
That's the nice thing with Kyle Lowry too, is that now
he can run the second unit if he needs to.
Exactly. You can stagger these guys. You can split Toby and Kyle Lowry into one unit for a certain amount of minutes, and then bring Ben and Joel in for a certain. You know what I mean? You can split. There's so many different avenues you can explore if you get a guy like Kyle Lowry. Even Lonzo Ball. I don't think that one's as high of a chance as Kyle Lowry, but. I'm with you there. That's going to be it for the trade deadline segment, the buyouts. Hopefully, some things go Philly's way in that market. But before I get you out of here, Dylan, I have to get it from everybody I get on the show. Your top 5 players in the league right now. This is however you want to do it. I mentioned it to you before the show. Your top 5, your favorite players, your top 5 right now, your top 5 in the whole landscape. Whatever you want to do, my man. Let me get those top 5 from you.
Well, this is tough because there's guys that, haven't been healthy for a lot of the year, but they're just there. There's guys that normally would be in my 5, like Giannis, but I don't have him in there. Kawhi's a guy I have in there, but I might replace him on the fly right now with someone else. So I'll give you LeBron James, Kevin Durant. Pains me to say it. But James Harden, Joel Embiid.
There we go.
Now this is the tough spot. I have Kawhi in there right now, but that guy in the bottom right of your screen that you can barely see under me, you see that little 30 in San Francisco. I love him, and he changed the game, and he is the best shooter I've ever seen. And I know they're not in a playoff spot right now, but he's carrying a lifeless Golden State team by himself as a fringe playoff team. So, you know what? I'm going to go Steph.
Got it. Hey, nothing wrong with that, my man. That is your 5, and I cannot hate on it. What about Giannis? I guess I should ask.
He's right. So then it gets to Giannis, Kawhi, Dame, Luka, Joker. Like, it's tough, dude.
That's why I asked.
My list doesn't really make sense because some of my list is filled with injury and some of my list is filled with guys who I think are playing at the top of the game right now. So it's all fluctuated. Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I think that LeBron and KD have to be 1 and 2. I think they're the 2 best players in the world. I had Kawhi up in that atmosphere for a while, but again, doesn't make sense because I'm holding Kawhi to that. Like, you should be better right now. Like, the Clippers should be better right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's definitely a tough question.
Yeah, man. That's I have to ask everybody because it varies so much.
And you know I had to put the MVP in there.
Oh, of course. I don't blame you, man. I've had conversations on here. We could talk about this another day, but Joel Embiid is, when healthy, I think he is the best player in the league right now. And I think whenever you can't find anybody that can match up directly with him. So
I agree.
That speaks for itself. But yeah, I'm with you there. Top 5, solid to me, my man. But that's going to be it for this episode of Scotty Talks NBA Mondays. Dylan, once again, my man, I appreciate you coming on the show. Guys, be sure to go out, give my man a follow on Twitter at DylanJD98. You'll also want to check out all his stuff. I'll let him plug you into that after this. But thank you once again, Dylan. If you just want to go ahead and plug in your shows on the Painted Lines, you can go ahead and do that now, and then I'll get you out of here, man.
Yeah, no, man. Thank you for having me on. It was a blast, and over an hour and a half, and it felt like it went by like that. So always a lot of fun. Like Scotty said, you can follow me on Twitter. You see my handle right there. But you can follow the Painted Lines Network. That's what I'm a part of right now. I host a few podcasts. I host the Daily Dose with Dylan Davis, which is basically every day, Monday through Thursday, sometimes on a Friday. Scotty joins me every Monday for Mondays with Scotty on the Daily Dose. You can check that out on the Painted Lines Twitter or YouTube channel. You could follow my one podcast that I have on there, The Faithful Fanatics, at Faithful Fans 2 on Twitter, that I do once a week. And I'm also going to be having a Phillies podcast with my man Mike Small at the Painted Lines once a week, starting up closer to regular season. So you can follow that podcast on Twitter at Ball and Spit. It's our podcast, Spitballing, for Phillies and MLB talk.
Awesome, man. You are a busy guy. And I know we are in discussions as well.
Yeah.
We got some stuff that you guys are going to want to watch out for. Me and Dylan do some great work together. I love working with this dude. But thank you for coming on the show, man. I'm going to get you out of here. As everybody that's watching and listening, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Scotty Drowned. You can follow the sports page at ST Philly Sports 1. That's on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me on YouTube at Scotty Talks Philly Sports. And of course, I got to shout out my guys over at Heat Ratio Sports Network. You can find them at Heat Ratio Sports on Instagram and Twitter. Be sure to go give them a follow so you can keep up with everything that we're doing over there. And I also wanted to just shout out, we are doing a contest right now with the National Bobblehead Hall of Fame and Museum. So right now, if you go and you subscribe to the Heat Ratio Sports YouTube channel, and then go and give us a follow on Twitter, as well as the Bobblehead Hall, it's at Bobblehead Hall. Give them a follow, and you will be entered in a contest to win a bobblehead of your choice. Right now, they have some really cool Sister Jean bobbleheads for the Ramblin', what are they called? The Loyola Chicago Ramblin' Raiders or something like that. But they got some awesome bobbleheads. They got a Joe Lunardi bobblehead. Great stuff. Be sure to go check them out. Give them a follow. But that's going to be it for this show, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Dylan.